Welcome back to another episode of Revenue Optimization Radio, hosted by Patrick Morrissey, Chief Marketing Officer at Altify. Revenue Optimization Radio is brought to you by Altify, the sales transformation company. We believe the only way to unlock sustained growth is to deliver predictable revenue. Delivering insights, thought leadership, and the best practice on how to improve sales velocity. From the one man, maybe the only man who knows how to do all of that, at least this morning, Patrick Morrissey. Hey, Patrick.
Welcome to another edition of Revenue Optimization Radio. I'm out on the road this week, actually in Chicago, participating in QBR. So I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach than I have in terms of interviewing guests. I want to get into a little bit of a deep dive on a new report and announcement of a new category from Aragon Research that broke yesterday. The big headline here, as the podcast suggests in the title, Automate Sales or Be Left Behind, is really anchored around the concept of customer revenue optimization. And Aragon's new research and new announcement of the category yesterday really points to something that we've been focused on here at Altify, but we're also seeing emerge in the broader market space. And I want to get into the details about what that means. And I'm going to do a deep dive on the report. But let me give you the headlines here first. Number one, this is a new category, and customer revenue optimization is something bigger and beyond customer relationship management, CRM, that we all know about. And we'll get into what's different and why. The second thing to understand is that Aragon is asserting, particularly for complex B2B selling, that this is a mission critical category. This is not a nice to have, it's a gotta have, and it's big and it's moving quickly. The market sizing from Aragon suggests that this category as a standalone is more than $3 billion and growing very, very quickly at almost 40% CAGR. So this is not something for the faint of heart. This is something that is a new trend emerging very, very quickly. And then finally, they give some prescriptive advice about where to start and what to do. And we'll get into that as we wrap up the show here. But I wanted to take a minute to kind of frame the conversation as we get into it, because I suspect that what I'm doing this week in terms of participating in a couple different QBRs and a management offsite is similar to what a lot of you are facing. And the reality for us is that everybody's looking at how to optimize and how to move more quickly to generate more revenue and to drive more sales. If you're like me, you're in the technology space, you're following the big B2B players in technology like Salesforce and Workday, which means you just closed your quarter yesterday. So what myself and my peers are doing on the management team, as well as I suspect many of you are doing, is getting a first look at the numbers and trying to understand what worked and what didn't. And if you take this as a binary, it probably breaks into one of two conversations. Hey, we did pretty well. Let's figure out how we take it to another gear or take it to the next level. Or if you're on the opposite side of that coin, you didn't have a great Q1, and this has now become a matter of utmost import. How do we move faster? And that always leads you to the numbers. That leads you into wanting to understand performance by region, performance by rep. How did we do in new logo capture and new business development? How did we do against our renewals number? And what's our churn look like for the quarter? How did we do in terms of product mix? What's selling and what's not selling? And maybe is there anything we can discern about what that looks like in terms of market segments or industries or regions, with the idea that coming into Q2, it's going to be make or break. And those are challenges for all of us, because I don't know a revenue leader of any size organization who didn't get up this morning thinking, how do I move faster? How do I generate more value for customers? How do I drive better performance and better results? And that's really the genesis behind customer revenue optimization. What the report from Aragon Research that came out yesterday, April 30th, suggests is that this is an emerging trend in terms of trying to replicate best practice and drive the right kind of performance by not just automating sales, meaning automating the sales process, but bringing in process and methodology in a way that actually guides sellers and guides the entire revenue team. And their thesis that this is a new category and it's critically important. And in fact, when you go to the research, what it says is, in the summary view of it, to quote directly, is that, and I quote, customer revenue optimization is the new way to guide salespeople and the extended team through accounts and opportunities so they don't miss a critical part of the deal and then lose it all together. It requires a strategic approach and a targeted account plan to identify the appropriate opportunities to deliver meaningful impact for the customer, end quote. And arguably that last piece is amongst the most critical anchors of the new category, that fundamentally anything that has to do with selling, much less driving revenue and driving impact, is about generating an outcome for the customer. And that anchors most sophisticated sellers' biases and points of view about what good looks like. But I would argue it's actually bigger. It's a market trend around the reality that this is not about selling just products and services anymore. The best sellers in a B2B context have to absolutely be focused on how do we drive an outcome? How do we drive business impact for the customer and as judged by the customer? And that's really one of the key drivers around customer revenue optimization as a category. And what's interesting here is that idea in and of itself may not be new, but there's a rise of technology and enablement and approach that is really moving towards this notion of guided selling. What the Aragon research report says, again, back to the specifics of customer revenue optimization is, and I quote here, "This guided selling approach is the new way forward for sales organizations and the entire extended team. It represents the next step in augmenting and automating the selling process versus depending on forms and analog implementation of a selling methodology." End quote. A couple things to take apart here as we're digesting, what's in this new category. Number one, they call out this idea of an extended team, and what I like to call the entire revenue team. Any of us who are in technology sales, already know this implicitly, if not explicitly. And certainly the best sellers and the sales leaders I've encountered always talk about selling being a team sport. And when you really think about that from an organizational construct, what we see consistently is that sales-oriented CEOs particularly are great about articulating everybody's in sales. Well, the reality now is that we all live in a subscription-based world, and you have to be in sales all the time, 24/7, turned on. But it's not just about selling the first customer or executing a transaction. To make the model work in the subscription world, you have to keep the customer. So the customer success team is at least as important as the sales team, but fundamentally the conversation is much bigger. If you think about any kind of complex selling in any industry, technology being the one that I'm closest to, is you've got marketing teams involved trying to actually get the customer or the prospect's attention and position your unique value. You may have business development and inside sales people trying to facilitate early conversations. You've got technical sales, you've got sales and sales leadership, operations, finance, support, implementation. There's a lot of moving pieces, and all of those people are connected to the customer. And so this notion of an extended team, I think, is sometimes overlooked, and certainly it's overlooked in a CRM context. And very explicitly, what Aragon is calling out is this is the extended team. This is the full revenue team that has to be involved in orchestrating the customer journey and replicating both process and methodology, taking all the best practices for your organization and your industry and making sure everybody on the team is aware of what good looks like and is replicating the same behaviors in the same language to get to the right kind of outcome. And Aragon actually touches on a little bit of what's driving some of the macro trends here in the report, because the report's pretty comprehensive around their announcement of the category. It talks about, the what of customer revenue optimization. It talks about market sizing and sales trends. What are the elements? How does, AI fit into the picture here, as well as the broader sales engagement and sales platforms? And, what approach should people take here? But fundamentally, it comes back to where we started the conversation in terms of what's driving it is every sales organization, anybody who's in B2B selling particularly, is wondering, how do I get everybody on my team to execute with the level of precision of my number one salesperson? Last week we had Jay Shepard on, and he was talking about, really for most organizations, it's only the top 10% who are the strategic sellers and carry the load. And I think that's a good reference point here. It may not be any individual because everyone's a little bit different, but that top quartile that's really driving the revenue machine, how do I get everybody else to behave like them? And CRO is about applying a common approach and a set of best practices to drive consistency across the organization. And it's really being driven by several different trends. The Aragon report touches on several things that we're actually seeing in our business that probably many of you are seeing as well. When you think about the world of sales and you think about the mix of who's carrying quota right now, more and more organizations, large sophisticated organizations as well as small growth organizations, are growing not just their field sales team, but they are aggressively growing the performance, the capability, and the quota capacity of inside sales. Because in the highly digital, highly connected world that we all live in, you don't have to be out in front of the customer all the time. And in fact, many customers prefer a digital experience in multiple channels. And that leads to an opportunity, and it leads to the potential for more investment to grow people from their first business development job into full quota carrying capacity, but do it in a less expensive inside sales model with more capabilities. And if you have more guidance and more ability to coach and train and enable those pre-sales and sales reps on an inside, they're going to be less expensive than field reps. And there's a lot of economies of scale there. Number two is they have to absolutely be connected to outside sales. The senior outside sales strategy person who can show up in the boardroom and manage the executive meetings isn't going everywhere. The trick is, how do you get the best of what she knows and how she operates out of her head to make sure the entire team is connected and surrounding the customer and understands the strategy, as well as how do you replicate that at scale? Aragon also points to one of the other macro trends around sales enablement and going beyond CRM. When you think about the CRM, the great part about CRM is it's great for sales leaders and it's great for the executive team to be able to roll up reports and do forecasting. It's much less good and much less useful if you're a first line sales manager or you're a salesperson. I can keep score and I can add tasks, but that doesn't really help me do my job. It doesn't help me drive repeatable behaviors and help me build skills. And so this is where customer revenue optimization comes in. And Aragon touches on this, that you have to actually go beyond CRM. And there's a whole bunch of other capabilities in terms of content and AI and other things that you can start to bring into the party. And that gets to the notion of what they refer to as sales engagement platforms. How do you have a work hub for salespeople? How do you have a digital command center to bring all these pieces together in a digital world? A lot of those things are already happening, and we see that in the MarTech stack and in the sales stack. But when you think about this from a customer point of view, is customers want more value. I would argue that beyond some of the trends that they're talking about here and the reality that there's no single organization who isn't under competitive threat from a lot of different sides, whether it's the old entrenched competitors or it's competitors moving from industry to industry, or it's net new startups coming with a new generation of how to do the next thing. Those things are sort of table stakes. The reality when you zoom out around customer revenue optimization is that all of us as consumers and as business people expect great experiences. We live in an environment now where we know what good looks like because we can tailor what we want as we want to our own personal preferences. So if I want to put together a playlist, I've got all the music in the world available to me on Spotify or iTunes or whatever service I choose to have. When I think about my viewing habits, I have lots of different options as a consumer, from Hulu to Netflix to you name it, subscription services. I can get anything in any channel that I want. And certainly, we've all been conditioned to know that we can buy almost anything we want, anytime we want from Amazon. And why would we talk to a human if we didn't have to? Well, in a B2B context, there are a lot of humans involved in decision-making processes. What Gartner would say is that there are 6.8 people involved in purchasing decisions, and there's a lot more people involved in the review cycle, particularly if you're purchasing technology. All of those people have their own unique sets of expectations, and they want a good experience. They want salespeople to bring them value. And that's not necessarily happening today. And in fact, we've done our research on this, that a lot of times you spend all your energy getting to a first call sales meeting and that you don't get to the next step. You don't get to the next meeting fundamentally almost 2/3 of the time because the customer doesn't see value. And you combine that with what we talked about earlier in terms of the subscription economy. You can buy anything you want in the world now in the subscription context, not just as a consumer, but also as businesses. Everybody from Caterpillar in the heavy equipment space to all of us who sell technology to even manufacturing. I was in an executive event at Dreamforce last year, and there was a gentleman from Honeywell talking about how they're trying to move from a product company to a services company. The whole world is moving to subscription. And one of the more interesting ones I saw recently was Burger King. Burger King actually is a subscription coffee service now. They've launched something that If you want to pay Burger King at $5 a month, you can have all the coffee you want from Burger King anytime you want. Everybody's in the subscription world. So if they're not getting great experiences, they're going to switch to somebody else who will give them a great experience. And part of the other insight that I would suggest that informs the new category around customer revenue optimization is customers are not an outcome of the end of the funnel. One of the big challenges here is the silos between marketing to sales to support customer success don't orchestrate the customer in a way that helps you understand and actually action the right kind of value delivery for the customer. We're all trapped in our silos and we think about the customer coming out the end of the funnel, when the reality is they're already in the middle of your business. They are highly connected. They're information intensive. They are touching you whether you can see them or not. They are talking to your customers. They are talking to other influencers, and they will have amassed a strong point of view and a lot of information before they'll go anywhere near a salesperson. So the only way to get in front of that macro trend around empowerment of customers and subscriptions and experiences is organizing everybody on the revenue team to actually be connected and put the customer at the center of the strategy and think about the customer and their outcomes, not just what are we trying to sell them and what does that look like in terms of revenue. And what Aragon is arguing in their research here is that success looks like automating the sales and customer engagements and bringing it together in a way that's going to help drive more benefit for the customer and is going to drive more insight, predictability, and repeatability for the revenue team and for the entire organization. And in fact, they go so far as to say that by the end of 2022, which is not that far away anymore, 40% of large enterprises will deploy a CRO platform to enable guided selling, automate sales methodology, and improve customer engagement. That's big, and it's only getting bigger. In fact, Aragon in their research actually sized the market for customer revenue optimization, and actually they juxtaposed it with CRM, and the results in both camps are pretty astounding. What Aragon is asserting is that customer revenue optimization as a standalone category has gone from almost zero going back to last year to being a $3 billion category by 2024. And at the same time, their thesis and their market estimation is that the CRM market today, if you go back to last year's numbers for 2018, it was about a $45 billion market. And that market continues to grow aggressively. And they predict that CRM as a market will be $82 billion by 2024. So there's a couple insights to glean from that is, CRM's not going anywhere. It's big and getting bigger. And that trend will continue, but success in complex B2B selling means that you have to adopt customer relationship optimization as a strategy. That means that you have to think more strategically about what are the other capabilities that you need to bring on top of CRM to really guide the seller and to provide that process and methodology insight, and to make sure that you orchestrate the entirety of the team around that strategy with tools and platforms to bring it to life. For a lot of us, that starts with apps and augmenting the experience that already exists in what the revenue team is looking at day to day. And for a lot of companies, that's Salesforce. So how do you bring more process, more methodology in a way that helps guide and coach the seller about what good looks like, that helps drive the same sort of repeatable behaviors? That's where customer revenue optimization comes in. So we'll take a break now for a quick commercial interruption. And then when we come back, we will actually get into, okay, from Aragon's point of view, how do you bring this to life? How do you think about organizing a customer revenue optimization strategy that's going to drive the right kind of outcomes and is going to drive the performance you need to help predictable revenue growth?
You're only as successful as your customers, and that demands the need for an exceptional sales execution, revenue retention, and customer success. The challenge for most sales leaders and their teams, however, is that their sales process just doesn't match how their customers buy. Sustained growth isn't possible because the revenue team isn't aligned with customers and prospects. With Altify's sales transformation solutions, companies can deliver predictable revenue growth. Yes, we said predictable revenue growth. They can also acquire and retain customers, and they can collaborate across the revenue team to qualify and win new business while delivering value that unlocks cross-sell and upsell opportunities. Built natively on the Salesforce platform, Altify helps salespeople, managers, and executives achieve sustained revenue growth. They help accelerate sales performance for Autodesk, Comcast, GE, Honeywell, Salesforce, Tableau, and United Healthcare. They can do the same for you. Visit Altify.com, just like it sounds, Altify, Altify.com.
Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are talking about customer revenue optimization and analyzing the new Aragon research report, Customer Revenue Optimization, Automate Sales or Be Left Behind. And as we talked about, this is a big, fast-moving, emerging new category that's all about bringing guidance and process and methodology in a more automated way to sales. And one of the analogies that the Aragon team put in the report that I think, particularly for those of us who are in technology or who understand product development, they make a comparison to Agile in terms of the methodology. If you were to ask anyone in technology, what is their methodology for developing new products and services? They are, if you're talking to the CEO or the CTO or anybody on the product team, they're going to say, well, we're an Agile shop. You know, Agile is a methodology to help rapidly iterate and drive products. And they wouldn't think about building product without having methodology. And that's exactly the assertion that Aragon is making in this report, that the idea of having a methodology, playbook, a set of best practices that inform the process and drive consistency and drive collaboration across the team to get to rapid outcomes and rapid product development is one-to-one the same thing that needs to happen on the revenue team. You need to have a process and a playbook and a methodology to guide what you're doing and what outcomes you expect, where everyone speaks the same language and has the same set of behaviors that can drive value for the customer. As they say in the report, and I quote, repeatability is critical today because many companies don't have a consistent view of the sales process and no guidance or methodology to help explain what should be done at each stage of the process. CRO helps address all of this, end quote. That's an important thing to call out here. Again, back to the analogy with Agile, is most sophisticated sellers in large organizations use a sales methodology. And it doesn't matter what that methodology is because they're more alike than not. So whether you're a target account selling methodology house or you like MEDDIC or MEDPIC or customer value selling, fundamentally the best methodology is the one that you use because it guides the process, as Aragon's calling out here, and drives the behaviors you want to see across the entirety of the team. The aha here and what's different is this is about bringing that methodology into the digital experience, into the applications and the tools that the entire team is using every day to guide the right kind of outcomes and to prompt the users in terms of what they should be thinking about and what to do next. So you get out of the old world methodology construct of trainers and PowerPoints and blue sheets and get into what is the application telling me about what else I need to think about, what else I need to account for, and what can I do to help drive the right kind of outcomes for the customer. One of the other things they talk about in the report is they talk about the growing role of AI, and there's both an augmented version of that and an artificial version of that. And I think this is where one of the insights here that's not explicit in the report that I would argue is critically important when you get a hold of this or you're thinking about your own CRO strategy is that there is a notion that augmented intelligence or artificial intelligence technology is just going to replace salespeople. And arguably, and as this report is suggesting, anyone who's in complex markets selling complex products and services, the longer the sales cycle and the bigger the ticket, the more there is need for human intervention because you need to develop strategies and solutions and highly customized, highly tailored outcomes for clients. Technology is not going to replace that. But what they need is some prompting about what does good look like? What is the next best action I should be taking? Who else is involved? And how are all these pieces connected? And have we captured the evidence that tells us we're on the right track? Because being able to take advantage of the data and apply the data is critically important. And bringing that into the experience that not just sales leaders roll up on a report, but people on the customer success team or on the technical sales team or on the sales team can all take advantage of as well as contribute to and learns over time. So technology should help prompt the user in terms of thinking about what else you need to be thinking about to drive the deal forward and what to do next. And Aragon goes on in the report to talk about obviously needing to do, the platform and the technical assessment, but also wanting to understand a couple different facets that may be implied here, and they actually spell out very specifically. Number one being that you need to have a look at the realities of your technical stacks, and because there's an integration and an operational assessment. Just because you have a strategy and just because you start to want to consistently deploy and apply methodology doesn't mean all these systems and all this tech talks to each other. So there's got to be an assessment phase to understand, does the technology and the platforms that you have, starting with CRM, work with a CRO platform? Maybe more importantly is the change management and the organizational readiness. There's always change involved in any new emergent technology, and this one has emerged very quickly and is moving very, very rapidly, which means there's some risks for organizations as they think about how do they get their arms around the change, how do they communicate the strategy and what CRO is going to bring to the sales team. And what does that mean in terms of the behaviors and what the entire revenue team is going to do to make that change? And we see this all the time in our business as well. It's important to have executive level and sales leadership alignment, as well as it's important to have a change management and a communication plan to help people understand and to phase in the changes that you're going to start to make as you move into this guided selling approach and you start to automate the process and the methodology and bring the technology components together to articulate where you're going and to enable the users across all these different departments to understand how they're interconnected, how this lines up to the mission and vision of the company, the sales strategy they're already deploying, and where do they go next. And oftentimes that's where technology, not just in this context, but any kind of project breaks down, is people are resistant to change, particularly if they don't understand what it is, how it helps them, and what they need to do, and how it impacts the entire organization. So Aragon is, in my view, right to call this out and probably even get more attention. What they say to wrap up the report is fundamentally, digital transformation is a fact of life, and that sales is one of the most important and often overlooked areas. And customer revenue optimization is not about throwing more tools or more training at the problem. It's about stepping back to rethink the entirety of your strategy and to think about how do you not just augment CRM and tools, but how do you drive the right kind of business outcomes, and what does good look like at scale? And we've seen that in our business with examples like Autodesk, where by applying consistent methodology and making sure that they have qualified the opportunity correctly and using a CRO strategy, they talk about the critical six, meaning that there's 6 fundamental questions that they have to capture, that they have to make sure that they understand and have a yes to, that is actually captured in their CRO system. And when they do that, the critical 6, and arguably the most important, one of those questions is there a compelling event? And that's probably a whole different podcast about what the definition is of a compelling event, because a compelling event is not, hey, buy it now before the end of the quarter and I'll make you a deal. It's fundamentally about what's happening with the customer, what are the ramifications of action or inaction. What they find is their win rate goes up by 84%, which is extraordinary in technology or any kind of sales, just by managing and having rigor around a CRO strategy that's anchored in methodology and a process that means they need to capture and get a yes to those critical 6. Because when you do this well, the results can be pretty seismic in terms of the level of scale of return and the level of value being captured. So there's a lot more to go into, but I would invite all of you to try to get your hands on this report, which if you're an Aragon Research client, that's available to you now. For those of you who are not, you can get it from Aragon, or you can come right to our website at altify.com. We've put it right on the homepage because we're called out as a pioneer and one of the leaders in this space. And if there's an opportunity to engage, or if this is interesting, we can point you at other resources and other help to get you started. But the headline, going back to where we started, is customer revenue optimization, as noted by our friends at Aragon, as they published this, is fundamentally a new category that is bringing the art and science of selling together in a way that actually guides the rep and automates process and methodology to drive consistency and repeatable returns, not just for sales, but for the entire revenue team. This category is big and it's moving quickly. According to Aragon, this is a $3.1 billion category on top of an $80 billion CRM category. So this is a whole new aspect of really supercharging or turbocharging CRM and taking it to the next level for B2B sales organizations who are selling complex products and services in complex markets. And it's fundamentally a gotta have. As Jim Lundy called out in some of his discussion about this category, and he was actually on the podcast a few weeks ago. You can check out that episode as well. Is there's a number of seismic changes happening in the world of sales. Digital transformation is a fact of life for everybody, and customer revenue optimization is really a gotta have for complex B2B sales organizations. So if you'd like more information on that, feel free to reach out to me directly. And more broadly, I'd love to hear more about what you want to talk about, what guests or what topics you'd like to see on the show. So you can check us out at altify.com or on Twitter, or you can reach out to me directly. We'd love your feedback. And we'd also love, if you like the podcast and like what you're hearing, to jump onto iTunes or Spotify or wherever you get your podcast and give us a good review. And always open to feedback of how do we make this better. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thanks everybody so much for listening. Have a great week and enjoy the QBRs and the ops meetings, and good luck selling and driving revenue and driving customer value in Q2.
You've been listening to another episode of Revenue Optimization Radio, brought to you by Altify, right here on the Funnel Radio Network for at-work listeners like you.